this one, please put your hands on your belly. And I'm going to ask us to do a slow inhale through our noses and just feel a slight expansion in our belly. And then a very slow one out of our noses, and just feel it moving in, and feel how you are holding yourself and supporting yourself. Okay, let's go. Together, and I'm going to invite us to do a humming breath. And we breathe in, and then as we breathe out, you can just hum for that breath out, and just whatever note comes to you. If it feels like you want to try going high, low, whatever resonance you want. It's also nice to sometimes explore a few, so I'm going to do like 4 humming breaths with us. Let's begin. Inside yourselves that you probably had one that was like your favorite note. There was one that felt really, really good, and one that was maybe not as amazing. And also note what it felt like to be picking up on everybody else's voices and the energy in the space. And feeling what it's like also to create harmony with everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining this. And thank you for feeling like there was something about this that required enough attention for you to attend.
Sorry, that looked very hard and cold.
All good. Nothing like a bit of kindness. So yes, thank you so much for thinking that this was something worth spending some time chatting with us about. It's beautiful to be received by all of you, and essentially the inspiration for this started with the conversation about the temples that I host. It started on the Beyond Monogamy WhatsApp group, And in there somebody asked a question about Tantra, and me specifically saying that my temple was not Tantra, and it was a shamanic temple. And then in that discussion we got talking about the differences between Tantra, shamanic, and like neo-Tantra, and that kind of conversation came up about all of these different spaces and the energetics in the spaces, and also the safety of the energetics of the different spaces. And from that conversation we were inspired to open that up and have a public conversation about it. And I think that it's very meaningful to me because I am hosting temple events, and I think that apart from the work that I do in the space to ensure that energetics and ancestors and that to ensure that the spiritual aspects of sexuality and of this type of exploration around eros, I include that work in all of my temple spaces. But I think that while it's included and it's spoken about, it doesn't have this whole dedicated 2-hour window of really deep diving into what all of this means and what is involved in it and what it is and all the different perspectives. So I thought that it was really beautiful that we could create something that gives that extra depth of information. Another part of it is because not everybody is attuned yet to picking up on subtle energies and understanding and knowing what to do with them. Even though I believe obviously we are all connected and feeling the subtle energies, it's that slight that we haven't gotten to the remembering yet. And in that space, we can become so vulnerable to all sorts of negative, in air quotes, energies, and to kind of psychic attacks and vampiric type forces, and all of these things are in existence, but they're not really in our Western framework. And so when we think about these events, it can be quite easy to just think that you're going to another workshop or like something cool, a sexuality thing, and you could be walking into, essentially you could be walking into a cult. You could be walking into a situation where you are predated upon. Like you can be walking into some really seriously dangerous situations, and I think that trying to shed a bit of light on these sort of extra dimensions to sexual exploration are really valuable to share, so that you can make informed choices about spaces that you'd like to join, and that you can make informed choices about what you're picking up in those spaces, and if you think and feel that they are holding the right resonance and frequency to keep you safe. And so with that, I'm going to introduce my guests. You will all introduce yourselves. Firstly, I'm Amy. I haven't met every single one of you, but this is my space. I'm a shamanic therapist, and I work a lot with people's sexual journeys, and I work with a background in psychology and also shamanic work. I think I'll leave it at that and pass on.
Hello everyone, my name is Sara. I am a tightrope of much to the discussion today. It's a great deal of energetic hygiene that kind of goes into holding clear spaces and clean spaces. I think we have a conversation with likewise speak.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Carla from Gogo, Kian, Terra, Sora on the page. My background is in metaphysical and energy work, shamanic work, and it's all really been guided by my deep interest in trauma and how it manifests and how it can be healed, and that automatically ran into working with sexual energy, as that's such a big space within that. My personal practice is Tantric practice that naturally informs my work and my understanding of things. Yeah, excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Phil. My background is partly in the academia, philosophy, but then also in the embodied spaces, into Taoist things since the 90s, so Qigong, Tai Chi, that kind of thing. And over the last 10, 15 years or so, I've been going more deeply into kind of traditional Tantric yogas, with Kundalini yoga. I'm very much oriented towards kind of traditional Tibetan yogas and the inner body cultivation. And I love reading classical Tantric philosophy when I have a little bit of time. I'm also a father. And so much of my interest in this is driven by what I've witnessed over the years around how neo-tantric spaces have sometimes disrupted relationships, and that has had ripple impacts on families and kids. And so also part of my interest here in terms of this conversation here is to be mindful of how we're all embedded in relational networks and how the energetic play ripples. And so there's some personal stories that have motivated me to be part of this conversation on an ongoing basis. Cool. Thank you.
Great stuff. I want to do a little check if everyone is audible, because I felt like the two of you were, or even all of you, were quite soft. We're going to need a little bit of projecting. Okay, fab. Alright, so how this is going to work is we're going to be doing a bit of sharing. Each person will speak for a little bit about something that has brought them into the awareness of the importance of energetic safety in these spaces. And then from there we will go into just kind of bouncing around a bit, and then Q&A. You are welcome to hit us with any questions you have. Anybody specifically want to begin? I'm happy to just first to last, last to first.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, so I guess a lot of it for me goes back to kind of an awakening that happened for me perhaps 15 years ago or so, when I very suddenly, as a result of a bunch of different things, became aware of energy moving quite strongly in myself. And by that time I'd done lots of martial arts and Qigong, and so this is somehow something switched. And part of that switch was an increasing awareness of eroticism and noticing energetic resonance with people around me, which felt really powerful, felt really cosmic. And that then led into a deeper exploration of these various things of Taoism and Tantra and such. That also led into certain relationships forming around that awareness, mutual awareness of energy, which is, it brings a whole new dimension to intimacy, a sweetness, a kind of a rapture And at the same time it brings a certain kind of vulnerability that is beyond the kind of emotional vulnerability that one develops in a romantic relationship. And so, because of my exploration on the edges of the neo-tantric space in Joburg back in those days, and subsequently in Cape Town, and how that's also kind of enmeshed with a lot of the kind of polyamorous community, I was exposed to a bunch of relationships with people where there was a strong energetic resonance, but then they connected with others in ways that I wasn't aware of at the time. And I felt the resonance of those encounters, and they were very activating on a nervous system level, and I had no way of making sense of it. And so that was a pattern that repeated itself a couple of times, and it raised in me the awareness of how when one establishes a bond like that on an energetic resonance level, that persists, and it opens you up to whatever's going on energetically, emotionally for that person. And then with deepening into tantric stuff, I've also tried to think about convening spaces like temple spaces. And because of my research into that from an academic level, and also from my experience in other spaces, more shamanic spaces, I began to feel a lot of second thoughts about whether I can do this safely and what would be required to do it safely. And so over time I also began deepening my practice in the tantric yogas and reading more in it and recognizing more and more how many of those practices are actually fundamental to keeping yourself safe and keeping, I like to call it energetic hygiene, but not in a hardcore fascist kind of way of discriminating between purity and impurity. More in a sense of recognizing that, like, every time that you eat food out of a bowl, it's a good idea to give it a wipe afterwards. The same happens with your energetic system. Whenever you're engaging with an experience of any kind, there's an energetic input. And the same happens with, particularly with encounters on an erotic space, is that we take on something of the energy and we leave something behind of our energy with that other person. And that then obviously has implications when we're doing temple work and when we're connecting with others in polyamorous networks. Like, what are we bringing into that space energetically? What are we picking up in that space energetically? And how do we manage that? How do we work with that with intention and with compassion and with transparency?
I love that. I feel like I want to just check in if anyone has any clarifying questions around this, because it's quite an interesting concept. I suppose I will then.
For sure.
I will ask for those who are curious. Does that deter you from wanting to connect, being sensitive in that way?
Let's just say that it's made me very cautious and discerning. It's like really getting to know people well. And also there is something very seductive and sweet about energetic resonance. And it's very easy to project that sense of sweetness, which sometimes feels like you're coming home, onto the person that's triggering that. And to kind of have this assumption that there's this immensely meaningful, deep cosmic thing, this connection with this person, when we don't even really know them and what they're bringing, you know, and vice versa. So it's made me careful about that, about like, to what extent am I projecting my own stuff into this experience, because it feels so cosmic and so sweet and so powerful. It's such a rush, right? Yeah, and I've had encounters with people where it feels like, and this goes more into the shamanic realm perhaps, where it feels like maybe there's like different, like not entirely integrated parts of that personality that play out in relationship. And that has an energetic impact as well. And from a shamanic perspective, you might speak then of different like archetypes possessing that person or playing out through them, or even different entities playing things out, whether it's ancestral or otherwise. So if we take seriously what the tantric culture is saying, where they come from, we should like reckon with the reality of like other intelligences, other awareness, and also the reality that we in ourselves are perhaps fragmented and carry different bits and pieces that we identify with, which might not be really who we are in essence. So it's made me more careful, I'd say, more discerning. And in terms of running temple spaces, I feel like, and that's what I've been trying to build over the last while, it'd be important for people who engage in those temple spaces to have a baseline familiarity with some of the practices, like have some basic mindfulness meditation at least, have practiced some Qigong or Dao Yin or Tai Chi, maybe some Kundalini Yoga, some Pranayama, learn some of those basics so that you're rooted in them, like things like mantra, things like the ceremonial space, and like other facilitators, people who could handle it if shit really hit the fan and some weird fragmented personality starts showing up and playing out. Yeah, and there's, again today I was reading a little bit, there's this notion in some of the classical scriptures, which I can't read but I can read translations of, which speak of like entities being able to enter us through the cracks in the shadows. And I was like, what is that all about? Like, and as I was driving here, it kind of also triggered this thinking of like, part of it's also our own shadows. Those areas of us that are not illuminated by clear awareness and compassion. Those are often the areas where other archetypes can get their hooks in and start playing out whatever they want to play out through us. And so I think everyone who engages in that kind of a temple type of space, they're bringing stuff. We all do, by virtue of being alive. So how do we manage that safely? And so I think it's partly establishing some basic capacities and skills and awareness.
Would you say that it's helpful to do psychological preparation work as well, or is it more important to do energetic preparation?
I think they're both necessary.
Yeah.
And like, it feels to me like a continuum.
Yeah, because I
and
feel like having the ability to work with the content that arrives is, in a way, what can save you. Is like, can I take this? I think in our chat before everyone arrived, there was a bit of a conversation about, is it ever safe? And it's like, no, because we're walking into something that is inherently a laboratory that is creating specific stimuli that we are there to work with. So I just wanted to kind of like add the little piece of that, being able to engage with the material psychologically and then have the energetic practices to ground you could be a good combination.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think they feed back into each other. And I think fundamental to that capacity of working with like what's emerging informationally is also curiosity. Like, this is not for people who are just looking for some kind of distraction on a Saturday night. It's like you're there to really encounter yourself and others in a way that might show you stuff that's going to be uncomfortable and hard to digest. And it can be very beautiful and all, but it's also space, it's like a mirror, you can project all kinds of stuff onto it. It can lead to lots of delusion and inflation. I know earlier on we were talking about bypassing, it was briefly mentioned. So there's a lot of fuel for that kind of stuff as well in these spaces. And also the flip side of it is I think that there's a lot of stuff that we like to psychologize in terms of like ideas or thoughts, which may sit at a deeper energetic level. And it feels to me like a lot of the traditional inner yogas, whether it's Tibetan or Indian, look at accessing those kind of energetic, psychological accretions, or I like to think of them as almost like crystallized gunk that gets stuck in our energy body in different ways. And so it allows us to work with that, digest, release, etc. So that kind of personal inner hygiene then also is a really important baseline to be able to enter a space like this clean, and also be aware when you started picking stuff up and working with that.
Absolutely. And this also really reminds me of the kind of multi-layered structure of it all, because there, you know, you were saying it's energetic and it's psychological, and the two work together. But then we're also bringing in the ancestral and this kind of the greater cosmology around it, and like how are we interacting with all of those forces. So yeah, it does feel like it's something that you can really expand out into, and like the more kind of aspects that you can bring in awareness around, the better it can be. I would love to hear about the ancestral aspects of how these things start to manifest in spaces, and I suppose like what are people bringing in to these spaces and working with ancestrally that we should be aware of.
So I think in sort of just looking from a very Western perspective to traditional work in ancestors, there's maybe a bit of semantics that one can play with in just seeing it as the epigenetics. If you look at the study field of epigenetics, you know, so it's we sort of, if you want to look at it like that, personifying ancestors, you know, we speaking, saying that's an ancestor talking. But what we're referring to is it's a feedback from your epigenetics that's bringing through patterning, whether it's certain thoughts, whether it's ways of being in the world, it's aspects of our personality. We very much identify with it, and only when we start going deeper into it, we realize, oh, this is actually an ancestral pattern playing out that one could often see like in family constellations and things like that. So because so much stuff gets caught up, when I say stuff, I mean like our stuff, our traumas, our the things that we need to deal with, shows up in sexual energy and through sexual energy. And throughout history, there's been so many different ideas imposed upon sexual energy and how it's okay and how it's not okay. And there's this continuation of hundreds of thousands of ancestors that has led up to you sitting here. And they have all gone through a certain worldview that was projected onto them, and things like that, on how it's okay to either express or not express, or and so then also comes in sexual trauma, all of that. So what we're sitting with is not only our worldview of how it is okay or not okay to be in this time, in this age, but also all of that patterning and belief systems that's playing out. So when you're sitting in that temple space and there's this voice that's coming up and like, you know, what the fuck are you doing here? Like, you shouldn't be here. You know, this is wrong, or, you know, whatever is coming up, there's that space in us to recognize, you know, is this an inner child speaking? Is it an ancestral belief system speaking? And it can be like that, a thought. And oftentimes those ancestral energies can really push through to be heard. If there's something in that space that's triggering, or that's touching on something very specific, that energy might really come to the forefront. And especially in shamanic spaces where we're opening the space up, you know, when the words we speak when we're setting up sacred space, and, you know, we say welcome to all our parts, everyone is welcome. We're not just saying words. If you're saying everyone is welcome, you're saying everyone is welcome. So we can't say everyone is welcome, and then when somebody arrives, you know, we want to grab the sage and get them out because then we're not really in integrity. Our deeds and our words is not lining up. And so in a shamanic space, specifically with ancestral energies, in the African mystery schools, it's really about this training of how to meet the ancestors. You know, it's not, there's a lot of sort of thoughts about it's like ancestor worship, where for us we see it more as ancestral training, meeting the ancestors, healing the ancestors, healing those patterns within the epigenetics so that they're not causing chaos in our lives. Because that's what happens. It comes through in our relationships, it comes through, you know, so those ancestral patterns is really, when it shows up, and it can really manifest, you know, voice coming through that's not yours, or you know, like it can create a sort of big experience that might be overwhelming for the person experiencing it, as well as for the people witnessing it. And I feel like in those spaces it's really up to the facilitators especially to have the necessary knowledge or experience to be able to identify that, posture themselves into a position where they can then engage with it and meet that energy just as they met somebody at the door that came to the temple, because that energy is part of that person to you know, what is it that you need. And then of course that relates into the altar work and being able to create a safe space to receive those kinds of energies and have the necessary medicine there to help them, because essentially the sexual energy is it amplifies everything. It illuminates, it's carrying life force, and it has the intelligence of how to meet places where that life force can't flow freely, and so it's going to go there.
Yeah, please tell us a bit more about altar technology.
Yeah, so I mean, I know, you know, Flo, before speaking a bit about in the Tantric technologies, working with the yantras, the mantras, the sacred geometries, which is extremely advanced tech, and I'll leave that for Flo to go into.
Yeah, let's
So
debrief on that in a second too. Let's pause that and
Yeah.
because I'm curious there too.
Yes. So I'll go a bit more into sort of, I mean, I don't want to say animistic shamanic, because that also touches on Tantra, but more the traditional shamanic ways that we work with, is that altar is, you know, it's not just a crystal and a candle as decoration to make it seem like this is a spiritual space. In this animist view, it's a living field. It's a living technology that is a construct in and of its own. So for us working with the altar technology, we firstly want to, we're creating a prepared environment for anyone that is arriving in this space, including energies, astral energies, inner children, ancestors. And so when we're creating a school, we want to first know that we've got sufficient teachers. We've got the masters of that craft, which we are opening a school for. So on that altar, we want to invite those masters. So if I'm making an altar for this sort of work, I'm going to be inviting those dakas, those dakinis, those bodhisattvas that have mastered this energy to come and broadcast that frequency into the space. But I'm also going to invite the mountains, you know, to help us ground, the ocean, to help those energies to wash and to come back to the one, to come back home. Food for the ancestors, tobacco to help us to strengthen our intention. I'm gonna maybe put there the Ho'oponopono prayer, you know, because everything on that altar is broadcasting a certain medicine into the space. And so when those frequencies land and when we open up the sacred space, we can invite them. Look here, don't come and sit on the participants, because each one is here for what they are coming to receive. Here's a space to sit. Come and sit on the altar and come and receive what you are needing to receive from the prepared environment that we've set up, like a Montessori classroom, you know, where the child is drawn to what they need and what they are interested in to work with. And so, yeah, that's, and it includes inner children, you know, because when you're arriving in that space, you're not arriving without, as much as you're not arriving without your ancestors, you're not arriving without your inner children. So who's the one that's coming here? Is it your 17-year-old self? Is it your current age that's coming to receive medicine? Or is it the 3-year-old? And maybe the interaction you're going to have with that person is not the right interaction for the 3-year-old. So you're inviting the 3-year-old to come and receive at the altar while you call in the grown-up self to transmute that energy, to transmute that pattern, to work consciously with that pattern that the 3-year-old is running in your life. But you are essentially stepping into the parent, into the inner parent, and say, okay, I'm the one here now, but be on the altar. This is not the space where you engaging anymore, because that comes through, you know, when we're in a sexual encounter with somebody, for the inner child to open up.
Yeah.
Often. And then how do we meet that? So we can create these safe spaces with that awareness.
Something that I wanted to, I mean, I assume that altar work, that could be its own entire workshop.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I'm wondering, like, what are the little essences from that people could take away? For instance, if we're just going and we're going to attend a temple night and we want to kind of bring in some of that altar tech, could we just grab some things that represent the caretaking that our parts need, and we bring that along? Or what would you recommend?
You could, you know, I think that goes into the vetting process, you know, like, is this going to be a space where this is even known about, you know, like, is there altar being created? I mean, you could create body altar. The technology of beads is a body altar, you know, for ancestors to sit to. It may be something you wear for protection, so you can create sort of a body altar, or you can create an altar for yourself at home that is your anchor for when you go. You know, create that sacred space by yourself and make a clear agreement between your different parts. Speak to your ancestors about why you are going here. I'm not going here to find a husband. Don't think that person I'm gonna exchange energy with is now gonna be my husband, you know, or I'm not gonna go here for this reason. Be clear, this is why we're going here tonight, and this is what we're going to receive. And then for inner children as well, maybe you wanna put your granny there on the altar and say, look, all the inner children, you can play here with granny tonight, you know, so you can feel safe here. And this is like a different way of, you know, like thinking about this stuff, but we are constellating all the time.
Yeah, so it feels also like being very intentional will be helpful, because when you're intentional, I mean, you might decide this temple is for my 15-year-old who didn't get to play sexually and be and explore, who was just brought into sexuality in this, you know, not ideal way, and I'm gonna bring that part of me to this temple so that I can explore eros in a childlike, playful, young, like the innocence, bring that in. And so maybe the sort of awareness around what you are putting at the altar and what you're taking with you is like a really beautiful way to also be very intentional about how you are wanting to engage.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. I want to quickly do a time check so that I don't. Okay, cool. Yeah, I wanted to also hop over and I don't know everything that you were talking about, but earlier there was a piece that I remember you talking about around the ethics and the hygiene, and I think that there is this kind of these different pillars, and safety in the way that relates to you being like a facilitator trainer and having the academic background in this, and like having that understanding from your nursing and that part of your training on like how touch and care and safety come into play in these spaces also.
For the most part, tantric spaces are not governed, right? They're not mandated, they're not held by professional standards, and that leaves a lot of room for both in amplification, can be fucking great, sorry.
Grown-ups on
can
the call.
be great, but it can also be alarming, and that's the whole point, that when you're engaging in tantric practices, we have to understand you're entering into pathways and lineages that come with a great depth of learning experience and process. So when we're talking about tantrics, you choosing to be a tantric for the night, it's not recreational. It's actually going into an initiation. Your first one is an initiation, and so when you think of it traditionally, historically, all tantrics were yogis. They went to the school of white, detox, meditation, cleaning, amplification for spiritual growth. You are going and harvesting all of the energy from your root, from your sacral, from your heart, and you're pushing it up so that you have. And it is without sexual, impurity, or the 5 M's. The 5 M's are the impurities you're supposed to avoid. And the tantrics are yogis who said we are still sacred if we can still partake in all these joyous things that God gave us. And so you are choosing to be tantric does not mean that you are not playing the game of the yogi. You are playing the game of the yogi, and so you have to understand you need the spaces, as he's saying. You do need to understand what energetic hygiene means, cleaning your system, centering your system, even understanding your subtle body, so that when you go into this arena of union play, you have centered yourself and you're so aware. But all of this stuff, we can say, be aware of yourself. It takes years to become aware of yourself. And you can have education and understanding. And you can be a teacher. I'm constantly being mind blown by the level of awareness of myself and how I have to re-stagger, reframe, and shift everything about myself. And I come with awareness. I come with mad education. I come with really a great experience and desire and curiosity to play. That does not mean that I do not get hurt in this arena. I get hurt all the time. I'm a highly sensitive neurodivergent. I am primed to be abused in this arena. So then how do I take that and step in? And that's, it's more, we can talk broadly, deeply, widely, but what we're talking about is how do we make this tangible? How do we work with this? And yeah, I can tell you, you use your mudra. Yeah, mudra's activated me. I'm walking and all of a sudden my hand goes like this. It's a reaction because the technology has been activated in me. So that can mean hello and that can mean goodbye. And it's really what I'm transmuting that allows that. And that's what you feel in tantric spaces, is that you have come with your perception of, oh, she's beautiful, I want her, I'm gonna approach her, and I go like this. And you don't even know what this means, but you feel it through your whole body. That's tantric play, and that's what you're entering into. So it's not recreational, it's not a sex party, it's not a play party, it's none of these things. And that's why so many people have these experiences.
Absolutely. And so I think that you've like really opened something up that is, what do I say? I mean, if I were like in an old magazine, I would say controversial, because you're talking about the space being inherently dangerous, and here we are talking about energetic safety. And so if I'm new to the space, what do I do with that? Like, how do I prepare myself to go into a space when I don't have years of alive mudras?
If you're not a yogi, it's just awareness that like, okay, cool, I'm going into something that is big. Why am I going into this? Am I lonely? Am I bored? Am I hungry? Am I, and all of the answer to, the truest answer to that will guide your process. But the question is, can you get to that true answer? A lot of us don't. A lot of us buy a ticket because, okay, and they're like, don't question ourselves, why are we going? But this is not going to a bar. This is going for relational exchange. It is expensive, actually. It is the biggest currency that you can spend. So why are we not taking time to invest? So you check in with yourself. Why do I want to go? What does this feel like in my system? Am I like, does it activate curiosity? Does it activate fear? Does it activate shame? That's the hugest one for a lot of people to deal with. And shame is complex. And it's one of those things that we do not realize the depth of it until the layers start coming off. And you don't even, as the layers of your clothes come off during a thing, you're going through these layers yourself. And the problem is what we're saying, it's not always your energy, it's the energy of the space. It's our job to cultivate the space. The lighting will be on point, the music will feed you. All of this is meant for that experience, but what did you come for? So like, I'm a huge fan of activating yourself as like, power of the voyeur. Like, your first time you go to an event, why must you play? Unless your whole body is like, I'm ready to play. Otherwise, why can't you go and be a voyeur and just watch and be actually drawn in by invitation or desire, like true desire, not a flux of frenzy of everything. So even if you're going kink spaces, tantric spaces, any new spaces, whatever, it's just this immense power that you can gain in yourself that I can just watch and I can just leave and nobody can touch me, and how much power we have into that spaces. So clearing and then understanding what you want and what level you want to engage in. I'm a huge fan of the concept of milder, not wilder, right? So it's like, if I go in and I say I'm going to be a voyeur that night, then that's the energy I'm working with in that night. If I feel really compelled to play, I better check in. Why all of a sudden this energy amplified, and now I want to go and get naked with everybody. Whose energy is that made me want to get naked and up level? Is it mine? And you know what? It might truly be. You might truly fall into these transcendental situations with the right person, the right situation, the right time. That is your discernment to have, but that is high level work. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think like that engagement from self is so important, because I speak about this also in sessions with clients, that there is so much of this, what was previously coined as like transference and counter-transference. And what that is that sometimes somebody will be in a space with me, and this is kind of how the whole entire world works with each other, the flow of things, is that you can be in a space and the thing that you are working with is what you call to yourself. And so I don't know if you have ever kind of been almost like called into being somebody's monster, where somebody is like, they have a very specific insecurity and you somehow just, you do the thing. You do the thing that triggers them, and you can't even work out why on earth, like, why did I say something about that person's nose? I never speak about people's noses. I don't know, you know, like, what is the thing that just made me become their monster and like activate their insecurity? And that is essentially technology. Like, that is us calling in what we need constantly, because we're trying to work with that. Yeah. And so when I work with people and their trauma healing journeys, when they do some beautiful healing work and then a year later they come back and they're like, oh, I'm going through this thing and like all my trauma is back, and they feel like, oh, I didn't even, what have I been doing for so many years, like trying to heal and trying to fix myself, and now I'm still sitting with this. And what I say to them is that this was the thing that you got to work with, because we each get our things, and then we need to work with those things constantly. And if we just like that trauma was gone, we're gonna need a new stimulus to work with. And so for me, my opinion is just like, it's fine, I'll keep just that one. I will just work with that one. It can come up as many times as it wants until I've learned all my lessons that I need to learn through it. Because every time it comes up, there is a different learning that's coming from it, and there is a deepening of your understanding of what it was and what it was for you and what it was for your spiritual growth. And eventually those things will be the things that enlighten you if you learn how to engage with them in a more enlightened way. And so for me, when I hear this, I really think it's important to bring in the understanding that the things that we're being triggered by in these spaces are things that we're specifically calling in because we're wanting to work with them on a different level. They're coming up to be worked with. And so when we have unpleasant experiences, that is the medicine, like that's the technology. And if we don't understand that about these spaces, and we think that we're here to have the best experience and to experience like bliss and connection, and it's going to be beautiful, like those things happen, and that's wonderful, and they can happen, but you can also have somebody just appear and be your perfect monster, somebody not choose you, and you feel broken because you're obviously unchoosable, and it's a mini death inside, and it ruins the whole evening for you. But there is the thing that you know, like now, oh, I have so much insecurity that I completely shut down. Like, this is so important to go and work with. And so if you use these spaces as a discomfort laboratory, and you see, okay, I also like kind of went along with that exercise, and I really wanted to say no and practice a no, and then I didn't manage. I was just kind of like, okay, I'll sit very close to this person, and I actually wouldn't mind sitting a little bit further back and honoring that. When you recognize that you betrayed yourself, there we go. Like that's the piece that you can work with. That is then you can take that outside into your self-work space and go like, how can I strengthen that muscle? And so there's something really important about what these negative experiences in temple provide you. So there's almost like a balance of understanding that triggers will come up and that people will be your perfect monster in the moment. And then there is this space of, am I actually in a safe container? Are the facilitators able to hold me in that? If I have a moment, if I am going into a triggered space, if I am having a shutdown, am I going to be held in the right way and supported through that? And I think that kind of discernment in your vetting process is really important. If you're in a vetting call, you're not just like in a job interview and you're desperate for the position. You need to check out the facilitator. Like, are you a safe person to hold me if I can't handle it? If I go into a dissociation, can you pick that up? Can you hold me through that? And I think that this also goes into what you opened with, is that a lot of people come into this purely because they've experienced some Tantra and they want to do that, which is beautiful, but for safe participation, it's really helpful to know that these people have the skills to actually work through something huge that's arriving for you. I had a conversation with somebody recently who spoke about a moment where they practiced their no, and the person that they said it to had a meltdown. And in that situation, the facilitators went to support the guy who had the meltdown, and nobody came to check in on her. And that was like a big teaching moment to both her and everybody in the space, that this is, even though we say like, you know, is sacred and we can practice on no, like there she just did her no, and like this is the result. Like, I might just people please my way through this. I might just fawn and like not have that experience. And so it's also really important to feel like you can suss out your facilitators and check, like, do you get this? Do you get this big picture that's going on here? And I think that this is the kind of conversation that can give you the tools to know what to look for when you are in this type of process. Because often we're just like, I'm keen, I'd love to attend, sounds nice. But if we can say, how do you work with protecting the space? How do you work with ancestors? How do you work with energy hygiene? And you can ask those questions, you're going to be so much safer in any of these spaces.
And be vulnerable and honest. If you're in a vetting call and you have traumas yourself, you can be very blunt and honest. I have, sexual assault violations. Are we doing any practices that involve X, Y, and Z? You can bring up your specific everybody in the room should be accommodated for, and that's only possible to do when you know as a facilitator. Best place to do that is in the vetting process, okay? And it is ultimately, it is a responsibility of the facilitator. A trained facilitator should be vetting and asking these kind of things. However, that being said, ultimately, every responsibility is your own, right? We are adults engaging into spaces. So if you bypass something in yourself because you're embarrassed to bring it up, or even maybe it's dormant and you're repressing it, and you're like, I'm cool with like hooking up with strangers, and then when you get there and then you're confronted by a stranger who truly desires you, and that sends you into a flux and a frenzy, then you only should go back to yourself and say, self, we are not cool with hooking up with strangers. Let's go back to square one.
Yeah. Did you want to say something?
Yeah. So, I mean, you asked earlier on around this thing of geometry, right? And getting back to that. And you also mentioned this thing of being able to be the voyeur. And so, in the traditional way of speaking about these types of gatherings, they would call them Gana chakra. So, a chakra is a circle of people like we are now, more or less. Gana refers to the host, like multitudes. So in other words, it's the people that are gathering together, but it's also everything that they bring, all their ancestry, all their demons and ghosts and whatever's floating about them. It's all convening in this space. But every circle has its own geometry, and most of these practices have a geometry also in terms of how the space is organized. So one of the ways that one can organize a temple space so that there is a lot of agency is to have an understanding that if you're on the periphery, you're mostly in the witnessing and the voyeuring space, and that you actively construct the space that everyone is moving through as a way that people can navigate different levels of interest, playfulness, consent, and so forth. That's the one thing that came up for me there, is that there might be a hot spot in the middle where things get really juicy and steamy, and those who are experienced and courageous, they want to go play there, they can do that. There might be couples a little bit more off to the edges, and then there might be people that's just wanting to see, check this whole thing out, witness, hold space. And even in the witnessing, there's stuff that's going to come up for you. Right? It might be desire, it might be disgust, it might be pride, like, ooh, I'm a lot buffer than this dude is. Or it might be shame, it's like, whoa, they're all so beautiful, look at me, I'm old and like, wrinkly and all. So, and that's the other thing in terms of geometries that I just wanted to bring in. One of the lineages that I draw a lot of inspiration from is the Tibetan Buddhist lineage, and they work with a very particular geometry, their kind of mandala, which is, it juxtaposes like key emotional states. So there's desire and craving, and then there's aversion or hatred or disgust, there's pride, and then there's shame, and then there's confusion around which the whole thing spins. That's kind of at the hub of the wheel. And so if we've worked a little bit with ourselves, we can track ourselves. Where am I on this wheel? How am I responding to this particular experience? And how does it feel in my body? How's my body responding to this? So there's that level of self-awareness, embodied self-awareness of our energetic and somatic response to an experience. But there's also that emotional and energetic awareness of different flavors of reaction to what's going on. And that links to the altar as well, in that you can construct, and that's one of the very basic ways my Sinhalese teacher showed me. He was a martial arts instructor actually, but what he basically said is that your altar is like a mandala, and you bring key elements into it, and so the different directions, and that's kind of similar to the Native American medicine wheel teachings. Each of the directions has an element, and the fundamental altar will have the primary elements in it. A candle that represents fire. There's likely to be rice or grain of some form that can represent earth. There's likely going to be a little cup with water. There's going to be incense and likely flowers that represent more the kind of air space. So essentially, if you construct a basic altar with 4 elements and then some basic your own things that you want to bring in, you already have the foundations for a strong kind of altar that you can then build on. So I think it's one of the things when we think about these ceremonial technologies that they often have multiple layers of meaning in terms of how they structure space and how we understand geometry, also in ourselves. The energetic body, if you look at it, different chakras stacked on top of each other, if you look at it from above, looks like that mandala, where you have forward channel, backward channel, two side channels, and the central channel. So the whole body is your mandala. So the mandala is almost like a fractal pattern that is in ourselves, in our emotional body, in the energetics, but also in the space and the relationship with people in there. And again, a lot of it hinges on the level of awareness and curiosity that you bring to it and reflecting on it. And that's where I feel, again, like having some solid practices in yourself before you join these spaces means the spaces will be so much more powerful because you can engage with them with much more self-awareness, much more agency. And so that also entails your own inner cleaning process. And one of the traditional tech from the Tantric thing is to offer the things that you carry to the goddess as an offering. In other words, you think of something that you're incredibly proud of having achieved, you offer it to the goddess, let it go and so on. Something that you're ashamed of, you offer it to the goddess. The same thing, you know, whether it's anything you hate, anything you desire, the things that are up for you at the moment. And if that becomes a more regular practice in yourself, you're constantly doing that kind of energetic hygiene. So that when you're engaging in a space, whether it's a tantric temple or a gathering with friends or whatever, you're coming there with a much more clearer awareness of what's moving in you and more able to discern what's coming at you from outside as well. Anyways, that's just
Love
reflecting
that.
on that to you.
I'm thinking we should have a little body break and then pop back into the space I think I would like for us to talk a bit about some specific things to look out for, some specific dangers and little bits, that will be quite helpful to also cover. All right.
I'm also really keen to hear some personal experiences from you.
Yes.
As when you've had some challenges and
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can I just quickly touch on something you
Yeah,
said
yeah.
before? Just a small, when you spoke about the intention and that your intention can have so many layers, because I think that's the thing, right? We might think that we're going there for whatever reason, and the important thing, like you said, is to try and drop down through the layers and really find out, you know, we can go up or down, you want to commune with your higher self and, you know, really ask what should I be going here for, or dropping through the layers. And something that the sexual energy is going to do very fast is reveal that to you. So that's that like trigger that you speak of. You might be thinking, I'm going for this, but the role of the sexual, well, for me, one of the ways that I see the sexual energy is to be a vehicle for the expansion of consciousness. But the sexual energy carries within it the blueprint that organizes life force. How does the tree know how to become a tree? You know, so it knows how to go to the place that is in confusion and open it up. So I love that with the intention that it's really going to help you to drop through the layers. So be open to that what I think I'm coming for is maybe not the thing.
Yeah, I love that. Good note to pause on and think about.